Hello and thanks for joining me for another book to film chat. Our selection this month is Lord of the Flies by William Golding and the film adaptation of the same name, Lord of the Flies, directed by Peter Brook. If you're not familiar with the Book to Film Club, this was started by Adam over at Memento Mori. He curated a list of books that have been adapted into films, and each month we are reading one of the books and watching one of the films, and then we meet back on the last Thursday of the month to chat about it. So I will put a link down below to Adam's introductory video to the Book to Film chat in case anyone is interested in seeing what the past selections have been, as well as what the future selections are going to be. I will also link below to Adam's chat on the Lord of the Flies once he uploads it. So yeah, Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This was originally published in 1954. I had never read, or actually I've read the book. I read the book, but it's been so long ago it felt like it was kind of a new read. The film adaptation, directed by Peter Brook, was released in 1963, and I had never seen the entire film, so that was a first for me. So what this book is about, this book is, when the book opens, we meet a boy on a beach, on an island, or we think it's an island. He meets up with another young boy. This boy's name is Ralph, and he meets up with another boy who will later become known as Piggy. And they're walking along the beach. We get this idea that they were being evacuated from England, and somehow they've been stranded on this island, and they don't appear to know each other, which I thought was kind of odd. That the boys don't seem to. I don't know under what conditions they were traveling, but none of them seem to know each other or any of the other boys. But they find this conch. Piggy notices this conch shell lying on the beach, and it's a pretty thing, and they pick it up as sort of a curiosity, and then Piggy mentions to Ralph, you can blow on that, and it's kind of like a horn, and if you blow that, I bet the other boys, if there are other boys here, they will come. So Ralph does this, and boys of varying ages start to sort of congregate. We do find out that there is a boys' choir there, and the leader of the boys' choir's name is Jack. There's also some little boys. I would say the age range for the boys were anywhere from around 5 or 6 to around 12. Definitely all pre-adolescents, though. But they, they're very orderly. They immediately decide that this conch shell has some sort of power to it, or, authority. They invest authority. They don't think of it as having supernatural power, but they give it power. Whoever's got the conch shell can speak. And so, they give it this sort of power, as far as a symbol. Well, they decide to hold an election to who's going to be their leader. Well, Jack, the leader of the choir boys, wants to be the leader, but Ralph has the conch, right? Found the conch. So they do a vote, and it's all very orderly, and very civilized. They only speak when they're holding the conch. They pass around the conch, and whoever's holding the conch can speak. But they hold an election, and they decide that Ralph will be the leader. Well, the leader of the choir boys, Jack, does not particularly like this, but he does kind of go along with it, sort of begrudgingly, I guess. But the choir always thinks of themselves as distinct and separate from the rest of the group. And somehow, more or less special, I think. And so, this sort of division is already in play right at the sort of the beginning of the book. But like I mentioned, none of them seem to know each other. Nobody pays any attention at all to the little ones. They call them little ones. They don't even call them by their names. They don't care what their names are. They don't even count them as really among the group. This is illustrated several times throughout the book, where they actually just right out say, little ones don't count. So the little ones, they don't really track, and they don't really care. And we actually understand from the book, more so than the film, that they're actually little ones that go missing, that no one knows what happens to them. But, the boys all start out very, sort of orderly. But after Jack loses this election, the choir, he says, that's okay, we'll be hunters then, So that just sort of comes out of the blue. Then one of the little ones says, well, what are you going to do about the snake thing? And they're like, snake thing? And so he explains, there's a snake thing, so Jack, the leader of the choir boys, as well as Ralph, who has been elected their leader, like I said, there is no snake thing, there is no beast. Most of the boys at this point do not believe in the snake thing or the beast. They end up calling it the beast. But it's enough doubt there that this narrative starts getting built around the snake thing / beast. So one thing that this book immediately made me think of was this quote by Leo Tolstoy. "As long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields," by Leo Tolstoy. This book is the living embodiment, really, of this quote, because the book, the book lets us know that there are other sources of food, yet Jack and the choir become obsessed with hunting pigs. They decide originally, Jack and Ralph, who has the conch, and one other boy decide to do a little expedition on the island to make sure they're on an island, which they do. And when they're out on this little expedition right at the beginning, they find this little pig sort of entangled in some vines and things. And so Jack, the leader of the choir, has a knife, and he's almost going to kill this little pig, but he can't bring himself to commit this violence. That changes through the course of this book. Oh boy, that really does change. That really gives life to this particular quote: "As long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields." They want to kill the pig regardless if they're hungry or not. It's like I said, there's plenty of other food. They just this idea really gets entrenched in the choir, or really with Jack, but then the choir follows everything Jack does. So the rest of the boys that were in the choir. Well, so the beast idea of this beast. So like I mentioned, it sort of evolves over time. Most of the boys start at the beginning do not believe in the beast, but then, this narrative building that in this book, as far as a tool of building a society, was really illustrated really well. It started out with the conch. They started building this narrative around the conch. They just decide, well, whoever's got the conch can speak. It's sort of a leadership thing. So they give it this power, and then the same thing happens with the beast. So things that evidence that they see that might support that there's a beast, they sort of create a narrative around that till eventually almost all the boys except for one believe there actually is a beast. And this boy that does not believe there's a beast and understands what the beast really is, what comes to be known as the beast, what it really is, and I won't give it away because it's a spoiler, this boy Simon does not fare well on this island with these boys because, humans are this way, right? Humans do not like to be told that their narrative or that their version of reality might not be true. So humans do not like this, and these boys on this island do not like this. So interesting, though, before I started reading this book, I read an article. This article sort of appeared in front of me, and it was like, kind of timely because I was getting ready to read the book, that William Golding actually wrote the book, The Lord of the Flies, based on as sort of a reaction to another book called The Coral Island and a Tale of the Pacific Ocean by R.M. Ballantyne, which was published in 1858, which was one of these British superiority things that, we're Britons, so we're best at everything. They actually say that in the book, and they actually refer to the Coral Island in the book, in Lord of the Flies. So, but anyway, as sort of reaction to this thing, the British boys in this situation would not be any different. As sort of a reaction to the Coral Island, where the boys stranded in the book, The Coral Island, are these British boys who always, maintain their stiff upper lip and they're sort of the epitome of civilization. These boys in Lord of the Flies, these British boys in this island in Lord of the Flies do not do this. They actually lose really every semblance of civilization and, adopt this really violent, authoritarian, repressive society based on power, basically. And to me that was really interesting. The thing about that I thought that was kind of telling about it, and how it was sort of a statement of humanity, was that almost everybody willingly did not even have a moral compass. They just got swept along with the events. Like whoever was sort of had the most power at the time, they just sort of went along with that. They just sort of went along with things. in this book, there's very few boys that have a moral, that stick to a moral compass. Most of these boys do not, some of these boys do not fare well. At the end of the book, there's really only one boy left who is adhering to a moral compass, amidst persecution. The other boys who still understood a moral compass, still had a moral compass, they got sort of coerced. They felt like they were coerced into following the authoritarian violent group. And really at the end, we only have, one little lone holdout. So I would like to think I would be the lone holdout. I would like to think that in a situation like that, I would stick to my moral compass. Would I be one of these boys that just followed whoever just to feel secure? Or would I take that risk and, stick to what I thought was the right and ethical and moral thing to do? I hope I would be the one who stuck up for principles, but until you're actually put in that situation, I don't think you can know. But I think human history is full of this, from World War II, the Nazi Holocaust, Nazism, all the way through civil rights movements, and any sort of movement where there have been groups of people othered and outcast and violence done to them. Would you be one of the ones who stood by and watched that happen, or would you try to help them or be on, sort of join them? Who knows? Well, I think I will leave the chat with that. I thought this book was the film. The film was a little bit different. The film was actually a pretty true adaptation of the book. I think the film did a really good job, of illustrating in only an hour and a half. It's a pretty short film of showing this sort of journey that these boys took from the democracy they had at the very beginning, all the way through to at the end when there was violence everywhere and they had sort of lost all their sort of traces of civilization. Well, most of them had. But I think the film, to me, the film did a better job of building up a lot of tension. I found myself really tense, especially there towards the last probably third of the film, as the boys have descended into violence. The book was a little slower in that sense, but the book actually, I think as a lot of times the book has more time to flesh out sort of details, and so the book was better at that. That some things that were in the book, especially around the little uns and how they didn't have an identity, and some of them were lost, and how this sort of beast evolved was clearer to me in the book. But all right, well, I think I'll end the chat with that. I do want to touch base briefly on what our selection for September is going to be. So let me just pull it up. Here is the book cover. I haven't bought this book yet, but I pulled this cover off the internet. The Woman in the Dunes by Kobo, and then the film Woman in the Dunes. This was directed by Hiroshi Teshigahara, and I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. The Woman in the Dunes, originally published in 1962, and the film was released in 1964. This will be the chat coming up. The book and film adaptation that we will be reading and watching in September, with a chat the last Thursday of September. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, take care. Bye.